Wow. Well, we are live today, and it is Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day, and I am very privileged to be joined by Lisa Ventura and Kim Adele Randall, who are both the other co-founders of this day. And it's a real pleasure to see you both, and thank you so much for making the time to be here. I know you're busy, and it's going to be a great day today, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it.
Great to be here.
Super. So imposter syndrome, it's a big thing. I've been doing a lot more research since we finally since we actually dug into it in the first place. I've been looking into it, and I was watching a video the other day about Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he was, some people don't like him. I kind of like the guy. Some people think he's a bit of a misogynist, but I kind of like him. And I think that what he said is that actually everybody suffers from imposter syndrome, which I thought was particularly interesting, like literally. And he's a well-renowned expert in psychology, I believe. And for him to sort of say that, it validates, the struggles that we all go through when we're trying to learn new things. And he said that basically every time you're trying to learn something new, you're going to feel like an imposter because you've never done it before, right? So what do you guys think about that? Kim?
Yeah, I guess for me, yes. Well, obviously, when you're learning something, you don't know it, but I think you expect not to know it because you're learning it. I think for me, when I suffered most from imposter syndrome was when I thought I should know it. So it wasn't that I was learning it. It wasn't that I didn't know it. It was that I already had, forgive the noise. It sounds like I'm having some kind of like party in the house. I've got two kids under 8. So feeling like an imposter trying to do the show whilst actually handling children. But I think for me, it was those parts where I had the job, but I didn't feel that I was worthy of the job, or I didn't feel that I should get it. As I've talked before, when I got my first board role, I was convinced that they were going to find out that I was just a hairdresser. So it was that feeling of actually I should know it and I don't. Whereas personally for me, when I go to learn something new, I know I don't know it. That's why I'm going to learn it. So I'm probably a little bit kinder on myself in that learning moment. I don't know, Lisa, what about you?
I think so as well. I mean, for me, I've been doing a lot of research in the last year since we did the second Awareness Day. This is now the third one dedicated to imposter syndrome. And I've done a lot of research as well into the links between if you deal with narcissists in your life or deal with people with narcissistic personalities, that can really have an impact on imposter syndrome. And also those of us that are neurodiverse and neurodivergent. I myself am diagnosed with autism and ADHD. And there have been some studies done that show that those of the neurodivergent have a higher degree of imposter syndrome as well. So those are a couple more elements to bring into the mix. And I didn't know there was a name for it until we founded this Awareness Day 3 years ago now. But I always knew that there was something there. I was always second guessing, always in meetings going, oh my God, they're going to find me out any second, and really in that fight or flight mode all the time. But I now know that I've lived in that fight or flight mode my entire life, and that's led to some of the physical stuff that I deal with as well, because the body definitely keeps the score when it comes to that kind of thing. And I think learning to manage it has been key for me. So I don't have all the answers, but I do have some hints and tips and things that have worked for me that may well work for others. And we've got a lot of great talks coming up today on this subject that I hope you can find some key takeaways from to help your own levels of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, no, I think it's so important, isn't it? And it's one of the reasons why we founded the day was to be able to share the resources, because when you're in it, you feel like you're the only one that's in it, and that nobody else is going through this. For me personally, I was going slightly crazy. I'd have one conversation internally in my head while externally I'd be trying to pretend that I knew what I was doing and that everything was going on brilliantly, and that internal dialogue would, you'd be like, oh, I hope none of that comes out. That stays in and the right things come out. So learning those, you know, hints, tips and tricks, it really has helped. Forgive me, I'm just going to go on silent while I ask the children if they'd like to be just a little quieter.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was very interesting is when I sort of first approached this subject with you both, I didn't realize that, you know, the subconscious mind actually has this belief system and it has these words that it is continually saying to us, and in fact those beliefs stem all the way back from when we were 7 for the three points in our lives. When we're 7 years old, those beliefs start to appear. And then when we're 14 and then we're 21, those key moments are times when Kim really helped me to kind of understand that. And I'm not saying I had imposter syndrome, but I certainly had, probably even still have these beliefs that are kind of running in my mind. But now I'm getting better at like questioning them. Like it's about questioning what on earth you're saying to yourself, when you're saying it, why you're saying it. And actually what Kim said initially to me was just present yourself with the evidence that what you're saying is completely untrue, and cross that belief out and write a new belief. And I've been doing that inner work for quite a long time now, and it makes you better and better at questioning it. Whether that's imposter syndrome or not, I don't know, if I'm honest. Kim, what do you think?
I think it's just about being passionately curious. So, you know, as human beings, we are quick to judge, and that's because our brains were designed that way. And they needed to be, because we needed to do fight or flight. We needed to know if we were in danger of being eaten or not. And despite the fact that it's highly unlikely that we're in danger of being eaten right now, our brains still work in the same way. And so we are quick to judge. We will immediately, when we hear something, decide if we agree or we disagree. And the same is true with what we say of ourselves. So if we can instead learn to be passionately curious, so instead of having to decide if it's right or wrong, oh, that's interesting, I wonder why I think that. What evidence is there that that's correct? What evidence is there that something else might be correct? It allows you to open up the subconscious brain to give you more information. Whereas when we're stuck in that imposter syndrome, we immediately leap to that it's not good, it's not right, we're not going to be good enough. To your point, Lisa, that constant fear of fight or flight in every situation, and it does eventually take its toll. You know, our bodies are designed that if we don't listen, if we don't give ourselves a breather, if we don't deliver that self-care, then our body will find a way of stopping us. It will find a way of stopping us in our tracks and going, you need to take a breather. So we often find, and Lisa, I know you've done loads of research on that, you know, something that is starting off as more of a mental well-being challenge, where it's about how we're thinking about ourselves and how we're reacting, can then move into something that gives us more of a physical challenge as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, it makes a lot of sense, because if you're not focusing on the internal, it's like I know it's a bit of a cliche, but the external doesn't seem to kind of work, and that will show up, won't it, in other areas, all sorts of areas, not just physical, just outcomes from things that we're trying to do, because the mind is self-sabotage, really is kind of a big part of this, isn't it? You know?
Yeah,
and I think sorry, go on, Kim.
Sorry, I was about to say, Lisa, I don't know about you, but I think sometimes as well it's situational. So, I didn't feel like an imposter every minute of every day. Like if I'm doing beans on toast for the kids, I think I'm pretty okay. I've pretty much got that. So in those moments, I actually felt pretty comfortable that I knew what I was doing. So I think sometimes it's recognizing that, I think from the research I've done over the last 5 or 6 years, that we're on a confidence spectrum. And on the one end of it, where our ability is greater than our belief in our ability, that's when we're really suffering from that imposter syndrome, because we can do it, we just don't believe that we can. And then obviously you've got on the other side where our belief is greater than our ability. So we believe we can walk on water, and the reality is we actually can't. And what we're really trying to do is get to that center point where our belief and our ability are in complete alignment, because that's when we're finding our authentic confidence. And we'll find, you know, throughout a day that we will swing around that confidence spectrum. But certainly since doing the research, that's really helped me to go, oh, I don't need to be in a box. I don't need to give myself yet another label and change this label for that label because it's better. I can actually go, oh, okay, this is just where I'm swinging. So how do I understand right now what I can do? You know, if it's that my ability is greater than my belief, okay, what can I do to improve my belief in myself? How do I go and ask better questions to get better evidence? If it's that my belief's greater than my ability, what courses can I go on? What learning can I do to align the two so that I can move back into that center space? I don't know, Lisa, have you found similar?
I definitely think that the confidence is on the spectrum. And like you say, there's some aspects that you're great at and some that you need to sort of learn a bit more on and so on. I think for me, I guess I'd always been in an environment where people pleasing and making sure that everybody else around me was happy was absolutely paramount, because that's the environment that I was used to, that I was in from, you know, way back when. And that fight or flight mode all the time of, oh, are they happy? Are they okay? Can I do more? You know, do I need to do this? Can I do that? And then that will sort it out and they'll be happy. And interesting thing was when I started to put healthy boundaries in place on a lot of this and just say, no, this doesn't work for me, but I'm just going to put some healthy boundaries in place. I was warned that a lot of what I would experience would escalate in intensity. And my goodness, it did, in ways that I just didn't even, you know, predict from some quite close loved ones as well. Just from saying, no, this doesn't serve me, and I'm just putting some healthy boundaries in place that's going to help me. And I just never expected the backlash that I got, you know, from that. And it took me a long time to overcome that and get to the point that I'm at now. And now I'm kind of on the other side of it. I can see that it was absolutely necessary to put those boundaries in place. Yeah. And I can also see now how much I was sort of tied into making others, you know, happy, far beyond my own needs and my own wants.
That's so common. Yeah, I certainly did the same. And when you started, well, certainly when I started to realize that it was okay to not do something for somebody else that didn't serve me, and that wasn't selfish. It was like, I don't have to do something that actually is going to do me harm just because it's going to make you happy, because that's not my responsibility, as long as I'm not being unkind and I'm not being, you know, uncaring. But that I found it really hard to do things just that worked for me, because it'd been such a behavior that was, well, you'll do what everybody else wants to do first, even if actually that is eventually going to do you harm. And it's amazing, isn't it, the kind of response you get from people when you do put boundaries in place, because they don't expect it. And some of that is we've taught them not to have to expect it. So they've not changed their behavior. We've changed ours in saying, I'm going to put in healthy boundaries. You know, I'm going to put in some things that are going to keep me safer. And that, you know, their response can be, well, quite astounding, really, can't it?
Yeah. I was talking about this the other day with Stephen J. Manning about basically when you push back to say, no, that's not okay. If you don't have a habit of doing that, it's very similar to a dog that is growling when you upset it, and if it bites you straight away without growling, there's no warning. So you've got to be very careful that you don't shout too much, you know, in the beginning, and you just turn around and explain it in a sort of soft way. But in terms of imposter syndrome, do you guys think that people are maybe a bit too soft these days, and they expect massive results without going through some sort of inner work to do what they need to do, and that actually social media and the way that people just expect to be, you know, rich, happy, healthy, and everything else immediately contributes towards people claiming they've got imposter syndrome. And we're actually just far too soft on ourselves and encouraging other people to do the same thing. Or am I just being brutal?
I'd say it's the other way around. I think we're too harsh on ourselves, and the amount of the ease of social media for us to live in this despair and compare society, because people don't put up the no makeup selfie, or when they've burnt their dinner, they put up the very best version of themselves. And yet the reality is that isn't how we all live our lives. Things go wrong for all of us. It doesn't matter who we are. No one is living a perfect life, because we are perfectly imperfect. But what we do is we see the seemingly perfect lives of other people and then compare ourselves with our messy reality and find ourselves lacking. So I think, you know, it's actually you're bombarded from all sides now. You know, I feel very grateful that I went through my 46 years of it pretty much in the early days of social media, or before social media. You know, I joked with my niece the other day that, you know, when I was at school, if somebody wanted to bully me, they'd have to ring my parents first and ask them if they put me on the phone. So funnily enough, that didn't happen. Whereas now there's no reprieve for our young people. It's constant. The barrage is constantly there. So we need to be able to provide them with more help, more support, more advice and tips to help them to navigate those challenges and find a healthy self-image that comes from within. And I think, you know, I hear it a lot. You know, we always bemoan the next generation, and yet they're our kids. We're the ones that are bringing them up. We're the ones that are telling them, you know, how to feel, how to behave. And then we also turn around and decide that they're all entitled. Well, I think we probably need to look a little closer in the mirror to decide which of those is genuinely true.
That makes a lot of sense. So what do you think then, Lisa? Do you agree with what Kim said? I'm not sure I agree. Perhaps I just come from a different angle, you know, in terms of I just think people are just too soft on themselves. My personal belief, but that's just me. What do you think, Lisa?
I do agree to a point in that I see a lot of parents. I mean, certainly in terms of how I was brought up on the things I was allowed to do and so on. I think a lot of parents now perhaps do let them get away with a bit more. So yeah, I kind of get that to a degree, but I'm not a parent, so I can't really sort of talk about that too much because I don't have children. But I do think there's a hell of a lot of pressure on them today, far more than, you know, I had growing up. And I believe that pressure does stem from all the different social media channels and the peer pressure that comes from them.
Yeah. So Kim, what would you say to someone that's sort of sitting here and you know, listening to this and stuck in their imposter syndrome, thinking that they can't do something? What would you say to them?
First, I'd say be kind to yourself, and it's easy to say and hard to do, particularly when you're in those moments. And I know that, you know, I spent many years saying things to myself I would never say to another living person, even somebody I didn't like. I wouldn't have said some of the things I said to myself. So I think the first piece is just be kind, and the second one, the 3 steps that I always use, because there are moments when you get triggered. I don't think you ever completely overcome it, because you just don't know when a situation is going to flash up that you've not experienced before, that's going to throw you straight back into that feelings of doubt and that feeling of being a fraud. But I learned a 3-step piece of reframing that's worked wonders for me, and, you know, from having shared it with people over the last 5 years, they've found it helpful as well. So the first one is, you can't trick your brain. So you can't just go, I'm not listening, and because it doesn't work like that. It will keep knocking on that door until you open it. So the first thing you have to do is listen to what it's saying. So, you know, if you're telling yourself I'm really rubbish at something, go, okay, so there are examples where I got this wrong. So I always use to bring the story to life an example of, I think it was 25 years ago now, but I stood up in front of a room full of about 800 people and told them that one of the charities that we were going to support was Imperial Leather, and I meant Imperial Cancer. And I've never said anything that stupid again, but every time I think about doing public speaking, of which I do a lot, the first thing my brain tells me is, you're not really good at it. Remember when you told everybody about Imperial Cancer? So I have to first say, okay, I can get it wrong. The second step is to ask yourself, are there any examples of when I did this well, of when I got it right? Because then what happens is your subconscious brain will go and find you those examples, and it will bring them back. So it brings back, the amount of people that have queued up afterwards or have messaged me months later to tell me about an achievement they've made as a result of taking action from having heard me speak. So you've got the first bit is acknowledge that you can get it wrong. Then ask yourself, is there any examples that I do this well, that I can get this right? And then the third one, and for me, this was my game changer. I am a biased mum, and I'm happy to proudly admit I am a biased mum. I think my little girl, as long as she's kind, she tries hard, there's nothing in the world she can't do. And so I ask myself, if this were Scarlett, what advice would I give her? Because I would only give her advice that comes from a position of love. And therefore, if that's the advice I would give her, it's the advice I have to take for myself, because I trust that I would only ever do the right thing for her. I don't trust that I would always do the right thing for me. But those 3 steps have really helped me. It's allowed me to do things that I would never, ever have dreamt of doing 5 years ago before I learned that step. So, one of the things I share with people is swap out Scarlett for whoever is the most important person in your world. But ask yourself, if this were them facing that situation, what would you tell them? And then take the advice.
Fantastic. So what about you, Lisa? What tips have you got? Because we've got to go off in a couple of minutes because you've got a webinar to attend.
We do, yes. I absolutely agree with a lot of what Kim said, and our own internal dialogue can be our own worst enemy. So definitely turning that around is key for me, and always to having responses to a lot of those thoughts, and just being able to deploy them at any point has been good for me. But yeah, we're moving on to the first of our events shortly, which is at 10 o'clock. I'll just do a very quick run through of what we've got coming up today. So at 10 o'clock, we have Imposter Syndrome and Intersectionality with Katie Humphrey. And Katie got an ADHD diagnosis at 25. And she's going to be talking about imposter syndrome and intersectionality. And I'm really looking forward to this one, given I recently had an ADHD diagnosis myself. At 11 o'clock, we have a webinar from Denise Chester, which is entitled Reframe Your Imposter. At 12 o'clock, I'm going to be doing a panel discussion with Dr. Juliet Lindell, and Nat, who's on this call, is going to be hosting it, where we're going to be talking about the link between imposter syndrome and narcissism and narcissistic abuse, which is something I mentioned earlier on this call. At 2 o'clock, we have a webinar from Kim Menninger called Conquer Imposter Syndrome to Advance Your Career. At 3 o'clock, we have our own Kim Adele, who's on this event, the co-founder of Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day, talking about defeating doubt and fear and breaking free from imposter syndrome. At 4 o'clock, we have a Q&A session with Zoe Rose and Chris Gunderman, who are the founders of the Imposter Syndrome Network podcast. And I'm going to be chatting to them both at 4 o'clock, where they'll be talking about the podcast and the reasons that they decided to set it up. And then we have at 5 o'clock, Nat, who's on this event and the co-founder of Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day, is going to be talking to Dr. Melissa Sassy and Zara Sassy about managing imposter syndrome and a family's journey to overcoming and thriving. And then finally today, there'll be a Q&A session with myself and Diana Morikara from Sensegura, where we're going to be talking about the impact of not treating people equally and whether this has impacted the sense of self. So please do join us for the events today. Get involved and join the conversation with hashtag ISAD2023 on social media. And we look forward to seeing you on these events today. Also consider donating. There are some links on our website. It's taken a lot of time and hours to put this day together. And I'm sure I'd speak for both Nat and Kim as well on this. So please do consider donating if you can to help us go towards it. Buy us a coffee, buy us lunch, just for putting this day on. It's taking a lot of resources. But do enjoy. And Nat and Kim, I don't know if you want to add anything else before we finish and go over to our first event.
Yeah, I think people should just... Sorry, ladies first. Go on, Kim.
Sorry, I was going to say, just to remind people that, if they are struggling, there are free resources available on the iisad.org website. So please do go over there. Hopefully you'll find something that can help, or reach out to us. We've designed the whole day just to provide help and support to people. So if you're struggling, get in touch. Yeah,
I'll share my insights another time. Good luck with your event, Lisa, and thank you, Kim. Please say hello to Teddy and Scarlett for me. Appreciate you.
Take care.
Ciao.
Bye.